Hello, listeners. It's been a bit since I've released anything. There's no particular reason other than I hate discipline and haven't focused on keeping up the pace. But it's a new year, so I'm going to try and make a renewed effort to keep the show on track and release 4 episodes a month. I can't promise that I will because the show does take a lot of research or focused anime watching. And I'm not so full of myself that I think 3 commentary episodes a month would be very good content. But basically, I want to try and be more productive with the show, and I think I'm off to a great start with this episode about a video game. No, really, I think it's a fun episode. Hopefully a little distraction from the Take Factory talking about fascist tile business owners. So I hope you like it, and I hope to be back next week as well. So today we have first-time guest for the show, Emily.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. And we also have 3, 4, 5-time guest, John.
Hey, it's me. It's John. I'm here to defend the USSR now that it's alive in Cyberpunk. Fun note.
See, you should have been on. You should have been on the Gunbuster episode to defend the USSR for that too.
Maybe. I don't know if it differs from Cyberpunk USSR.
So yeah, today we are talking about everyone's favorite game right now, Cyberpunk 2077. So John finished the game every possible way. I finished it one possible way, and Emily is still early on, but she has some very good input, I think, as well. So let's start with the first time guest, Emily. What did you think of Cyberpunk so far?
Well, I got into it. I mean, I have heard the buzz about the game for like the last few years, like everyone else, and kind of got into it when it started blowing up on Twitter. And I was seeing people uploading videos of like the crazy glitches and the weird stuff, like the pop in on the like characters just materializing in front of them and getting launched up into the sky, and was like, this is my wheelhouse. I really enjoy like when games go wrong, and I don't think it has not disappointed on that front. I mean, I really enjoyed Oblivion back in the day on the PS3. Because like the glitches in that were just incredibly endearing. Like you'd have people like walking along their own dinner table, like kicking all their plates and glasses off the table, and all the physics objects in the room would just lose their shit, and they would walk to the end of the table and then just say something weird like, "You have the hands of a healer." And it's like, what the hell's going on here? Yeah, and Cyberpunk has been a very similar experience to that. So I'm really glad I got it. So yeah, I had this similar experience to you,
and you're playing the PS4 version, right? So you have the extra glitchy version.
It runs like someone drowning in treacle. And I'm no stranger to that either, because I don't really care about like graphics and things, and I will even tolerate like quite a lot of like janky frame rates in games. I played Metal Gear Solid 5 on the PS3. And I played Bayonetta on the PS3, and these like are games which are famous for stalling. Yeah, it's something else. Like the textures, whenever the game is stationary, it looks fine. In fact, it can look quite nice. There's some bizarre like anti-aliasing effects, but as long as nothing's moving, and everything's sort of zoomed out enough, and you turn the depth of field effects off and stuff, it looks fine. As soon as you start running, like literally sprinting down the street, like your console will start screaming and the game starts staggering, and yeah, it's.
I actually had the opposite experience on PC. Well, not completely opposite. Like if you're standing still in the game, it looks good, but like I was looking through screenshots because I took screenshots of like lore and funny glitches and stuff, and they kind of look like shit.
Yeah, I found that with the screenshots as well. I'm not ever able to capture actually what the game looks like when I'm just standing somewhere, or like when I put it into photo mode, it looks pretty good. But then when you actually like press the capture button on the PlayStation, it ends up looking like just not very impressive. And there are certain places as well where I think, like when you look in your own bathroom mirror in V's apartment, that looks terrible on the PlayStation. So my V's like hair is all like pixelated and weird, And that's if her head even renders. I've several times like gone into the bathroom to like look at myself in the mirror, and I'm basically just like a naked torso like floating there. Then like her clothes will sort of slowly render in, and then maybe her head and her hair.
Yeah, I ended up being bald a lot because I would be wearing a helmet that like takes your hair away, and so like in a lot of cases the helmet wouldn't render, so it just
whenever
looked like I
I'm
was bald.
on a motorcycle and I put the game, I go into like the photo mode. V's hair all seems to sort of like get thrown forward, as though she's standing like in front of a turbine or something, and so it's all blown forward, which doesn't make any sense. It should be like the other way around, but it goes through her head, so you can just see the back of her skull, basically. I have no idea what's going on with that. I put on Twitter as well earlier today, like a video of V like crouching down while she's riding the bike and like vanishing into the petrol tank on the motorcycle. It's just very strange. I don't know what's causing that at all. But yeah.
You know what is kind of interesting about the texture issues, though, is like seeing what the models look like without textures on. I knew they looked different because I've done a little bit of like 3D graphic stuff, like when I was in my teens and 20s. But I didn't realize like how low poly the models are and how much work the textures do to like make them look good. Or I guess the bump maps.
Yeah, the kind of anti-aliasing effects. Like sometimes when you walk up to an NPC, they look like they're made out of Play-Doh, or like a sort of like carved potato, and then they slowly like render in all their details. Yeah, it's lovely. I love that kind of stuff. I find it like very amusing, but it can sort of like detract from the seriousness of the storyline sometimes. You know, when like characters are like trying to, say something serious, like they're about to die or something, and they're like telling you to go on without them, but then they are basically like a giant smudgy potato saying that to you. It sort of takes.
I pasted a screenshot of a car in chat that like the texture hadn't loaded on, and it looks nothing like the final car before that. It's all like weirdly like rough, like someone whittled it out of wood.
That is honestly how a lot of the NPCs and a lot of objects look on the PS4 version.
Yeah, there's that famous screenshot of Johnny going around with the low poly hair and everything. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think I've seen the ones. But they don't even faze me anymore because I'm just so used to that. Like you run up to a vendor and they just sort of like kind of melt into existence. It's really bizarre, but you just kind of like, I think this with all graphics in games, after you've been looking at it for about an hour, your eyes and your brain stop sort of registering that stuff.
I feel like it'd be less jarring if the other graphics weren't so good.
Yeah, that's...
If it just looked like that all the time, it'd be like, oh, okay, this is what the game looks like. That's fine.
Yeah, people say like, oh, it looks like a PlayStation 1 game. It's like, well, PlayStation 1 games looked consistently like that, so your brain could sort of get used to it. Get used to what it was looking at.
Yeah, back in the day, they looked amazing.
With this, it kind of like pushes you backwards and forwards between this like weird, like System Shock looking like characters, and then suddenly you'll be looking at like Keanu Reeves' beautifully rendered face. It is very strange. So yeah, like my initial like take on the game is I'm enjoying the story. Like there's some like scripted sequences which it feels like an interactive movie at those points, and it actually kind of annoys you because you're having agency taken away from you as a player. But yeah, like the main story's good. A lot of the bonus content or like the side missions and stuff are very like cookie cutter, and I'm sure like one of you will be able to say more about that because you've done like way more of it than I have. But yeah, the glitches are what has made it an absolute joy to play for me.
What about you, John? What did you think?
First of all, I just want to tag in on what M was saying. I was looking up that video you were talking about, and like you can't describe it. Like her head literally disappears at one moment after it comes out of the motorcycle, because it's like literally she's shoving it in some weird compartment underneath the handlebars, and then just pops up, and it's just like, well, okay. My take on the whole game is, looking back on it, it's fun. I'll say that it's a good game. But I was basically, the way I came to it was I saw the hype train coming by as it was building up to release. I'd see it every once in a while on Steam, and they're like, "Oh, Cyberpunk's coming out," and I was like, "Is that good or bad?" One of my cousins talked to me about it, and they're talking about how they have to clear out their whole schedule to play this. And I was like, "Oh, so Cyberpunk's gonna be a good game." It's from the guys who made Witcher 3, and even though I wasn't a super huge Witcher 3 fan, I remember it fondly, because it felt like literally playing a movie at times, or at least my time I spent with it. I don't remember it being like your average RPG. It just felt like a very lovingly crafted game for the time.
Did
that
you
I
play the
remember.
other two?
I have them because like I'm sort of a completionist freak, and there was a Steam sale. But
Okay.
I have not played more than 5 minutes in either of one or two. Just couldn't do it for some reason.
Gotcha.
But basically, like, I sort of got sucked into the hype. I was like, oh, this looks like it's going to be a pretty good game. So I was like, all right, I've made worse financial decisions than doing the whole pre-order dance. So it was like one of those things. I got it. I started playing it around work, and my initial things were like, what the fuck's going on here? I mean, without glitches, mind you. Like, PC was very like stable at this point, and I didn't really know how glitchy it was going to be. But it was just very overwhelming, because like, the first time it drops you into actual gameplay after playing through 25 minutes of your first like life story choice. Which, funny fact, like, I was like playing this in between like very long work hours, so like my first two sessions in the game were just trying to get through the life story choice to get to actual gameplay.
What did you pick? I honestly forgot there was a choice.
I picked the Corporal Rat one.
I
Okay.
feel like that's the
So
Yeah, I picked Nomad.
Yeah, I went with Nomad. I feel like the Corpo Rat one is probably, like, I would say intuitively it's the one the least players go with. I think like the Nomad seems to be the most obvious choice, because if you pick the backstory that's like, oh, you grew up in Night City. I mean, certainly when I play games, I'm always afraid that like the game is gonna treat my character as though she knows a bunch of stuff about the game world already, and like I don't. So I picked the kind of outsider, because I thought, well, that's kind of me, right? I'm coming into Night City from outside.
I don't know, like, if you felt like you got more information out of the game as you were going through it, but it is sort of gentle, where it'll try to introduce you to a lot of lore, and it'll definitely, even though like you're supposed to be like in everything, you always have these moments where it'll make sure the character asks like, so what the fuck is going on with this with you guy who supposedly was one of my best friends coming up through the company, and we've just seen each other for the first time. Can you remind me who you work for and what you were doing on your last job, even though I should probably know it? I would say it's very gentle narratively, but like the first moments in Cyberpunk for me were trying to get grounded, because like you get in and you have like 80 different controls. You can use a cell phone. You can open up inventories. There's like the hacking thing to get used to. I didn't know that you could press caps lock and permanently be in hacking mode. So that
I
freaked
did
me
not know
out
that
for
at
a bit.
all. I still don't know that.
I've definitely fat fingered it the very first time I went to hack, and I was like, why is the game so slow right now? Can this hack please hurry up? And it was like, I think I literally waited 10 minutes.
I think I might have
to-
done that by accident and thought that it was a glitch and saved and reloaded the game.
Yeah. So, like, I definitely had some growing pains getting used to everything, and even my first playthrough I did unsuccessfully, because, like, I got to a point where I was like, my character sucks, and he can't kill anything. Which is definitely, like, if you put, like, enough hours into the game, I say, like, maybe 15 hours in, and you're, like, you get to, like, some sort of level around, like, 20, your character's build starts kicking online, and you're like, okay, nothing can kill. I just kill everything now.
Yep.
So I rebooted it, and then it was like, finally, I gave in. I started Googling, like, how the fuck do you build a character? What builds are possible? What does actual gameplay look like? I went in for my second playthrough. I did a hacking build, like sort of like you did, and then eventually I had enough points left over where I started doing a 100% crit build, which I know this might be boring to listen to, but it's just sort of like the gameplay, like, you have to learn on your own. Like, there's not enough of a tutorial, even though there's a tutorial in it. Like, so you never
Yeah.
really know what's going on when you're playing, unless like you're super used to RPGs or something, which I'm not. I'm big bad at any sort of game. I just like to play them. But say like I don't know things like I could have been buying better inhalers. I wasn't utilizing shops or anything. I didn't know how to craft gear or anything, or that could have been an option early on.
But on the other hand, you couldn't really.
Oh yeah, on the other hand, like you really couldn't, because like a lot of the stuff is just locked out for you.
Yeah.
Behind your talent choices and everything. But overall, once I got into it, the story started flowing. I like the set pieces it has, but like the game overall, even though it's good, feels when I talk about the city, it's beautiful being able to play on like PC, and it's like the only thing that they were able to optimize with the 8 years that they were given. But it feels kind of like empty compared to other games that like I've played. I've played like Saints Row games, like GTA games, and I really like those. But when I compare those to like this one, from like the time you spend in a car listening to the radio to just what it feels like to drive around the city and do side things, it just feels so much emptier with the way that side missions work. If you spend any time in the game and you're like, I don't want to do a mission, I want to do something quick on this map that's not a main quest mission marker, and you go to those blue NCPD things, which it's just like you go, they send you a place,
FTPA
like,
cab, etc. But yeah, it's the only way to make money.
Yeah, and like basically like it's like, yeah, go to this place, click on this thing, kill these people, and it's like there's nothing more, like, because like you do the main missions and you're like, oh man, first class treatment. You have like those little cinematic moments where it does feel like a little bit of agency is taken away, because no game can completely 100% guess how you want to respond to things. There are little things to me that didn't feel right, like when you're talking about Johnny for the first time when he's introduced in the game, you have to call him a terrorist, and it feels like, yeah, like there's like, oh, I got this terrorist living in my head, and even if you don't choose that dialogue option, very soon after you'll call him a terrorist. Even as you're like close to him later on in the game, you still refer to him as a terrorist. I'm pretty sure Johnny probably even thinks of himself as a terrorist, but like there's no like he was fighting for something. Like there's no sort of like more positive option. I mean, granted, he did set off a nuclear warhead, like similar to Timothy McVeigh. I don't think Timothy went nuclear on that one.
The character kind of seems like a nerd. Like I thought things like similar to what you're saying a lot. One thing that I remember very clearly was you were talking to some like corrupt cop, and he was like, "Go capture this criminal guy, and he'll like get lost in the system." And no matter what dialogue choice you pick, she's like, "What do you mean lost? Like, are you fucking stupid, dude? Like, he's saying that he's gonna lose the guy. What are you talking about?"
Yeah, there are a lot of potential nerd moments for your character, which you'll step in if you're not playing like overly aggressive, or not 100% playing the way Johnny hints you to play, where you just like do like very nerdy things. There's a version, if I can skip forward to the ending, I'll just say spoilers, so you can cut it off right now if you don't want to hear it. But there's a version of the ending where if you go with the corporation, Arasaka, you can kill Adam Smasher. In the corporation ending, he blocks off Johnny, so he's not there for the final mission, and he'll be like, you know what? We're not gonna kill Adam, because you know what? Second chances can start for anybody. And it's like, you iced this dude in literally every other version. It's like, all of a sudden now, because I guess you picked the nerd option out of all the endings. You go with the corporation like a goody two-shoes. Granted, I think Takamura is probably one of the cooler characters in it, even though he's like sort of chained to his job. But
yeah, I liked him a lot too.
But like, from everything, if you're not doing main story missions, the world just seems kind of flat because they don't have any sort of story interaction or even miniature stories within it. It doesn't feel like Monster of the Weekish, except if you're doing like Beat on the Brat or your racing missions. There really isn't a lot of story to go around. Or extra like character interactions.
Just on that point, I have done a few side missions now where I think she's a police officer. I don't even know who she is. Like, well, this woman, like Regina, I think, will phone me up and say,
"Oh, she just looks like a cop. She is a reporter.
She's a reporter," because she'll tell me like, "Oh, like break into here."
I thought the whole time until the very last mission that I did with her that she was a cop, and I was like pissed about it the whole time.
Well,
well, she's a reporter who aspires to be a cop. That's
true.
Why.
Yeah,
because she tells you to like, break into this like warehouse and plant a tracking device on a car or something, and like the game has two very clear states that it seem like they have like a one-way transition. It's like either you're stealthing and sneaking around, or you're in just open combat, and it's very difficult to go back from combat to sort of stealth, which I guess makes sense if you just like walk into a shipping area and just start like dropping people. They don't just kind of forget like the Metal Gear Solid style, like, oh, I haven't seen him for like 5 minutes, he must be gone.
Yeah, they could still have an in-between with that, though, because, you know, like, if you get into combat with someone and kill them within, like, 1/10 of a second, you will be in combat with everyone on the map. Which is really kind of dumb.
Yeah, but, like, I keep having these missions where I want to sneak in, but it goes wrong because the game transitions from stealth to combat, like, very quickly, and there's not really a lot you can do to... Like, if you're caught and spotted, there's not much you can do to sort of save yourself. Like if a camera's seen you, you can try and hack it, but usually if you're spotted, that's just kind of it. Just like pull out your guns and start firing.
I did find out if you go into a conversation, like a story conversation, it will take you out of combat instantly. So like I was running across the street without looking, like a normal person, and someone hit me with their car. So this is the first civilian I killed. The first and only civilian that I killed. I just shot them in the head because I was like, fuck you. And the cops instantly started shooting at me. And then I went to wait for Carrie to show up for a mission. And it just instantly took me out of combat. And I never went back into combat. My like wanted status went away.
Perfect.
It's very weird. Very jarring.
I was going to say about that woman, Regina. She like calls you up, tells you to like plant a tracking device or something. I'll like run through an area and like end up having to kill everybody, and she keeps on chewing me out for like, oh, this was supposed to be a quiet mission, V, and like you're not supposed to kill everyone. But she never really there's never any consequence to that. She doesn't sort of, she doesn't stop giving me jobs, even though I'm quite clearly like a kill crazy psychopath.
Yeah, the consequence is less.
Oh, really?
Money.
She just doesn't pay you as much?
Yeah, you sometimes, depending on how they ask you to do the missions, sometimes they'll place a condition of stealth or non-lethality on a mission, and if you fulfill those conditions, they'll be like, and here's a little extra off the top for you since you handle that like a real fucking professional.
Oh, right.
And it's like 600 eddies.
Oh, so it's like nothing. It's like a couple of guns, basically.
But it feels good.
Well, because as well, like, I've had situations where I'll get a mission, like either like a blue NCPD like map marker or like one of her like gigs that she tries to fix you up with, and I'll try and like shoot someone with like a silenced pistol, and then it says, "Oh, you're doing something illegal. The cops are coming now." I'm like, well, these are gang members. I know that doesn't make them like outlaws. They don't all necessarily deserve to die, but if you walk too close to them, they'll all start shooting at you, and then it's fine to shoot them. But if you like preemptively shoot them, sometimes it seems like the cops, like, they don't like that. And I've had several situations where the cops have been called on me, even though, like, I've just been defending myself from the gang members who engage you in combat if you just look at them funny.
That sounds like a bug,
Yeah,
because
it probably is.
I could just like walk up to gang members and just murder all of them without them attacking me at all. And like, I basically literally never had a wanted status unless I accidentally ran over someone, or that time when I shot someone in the face for hitting me with their car.
I guess it like depends sort of, because sometimes you might be in the wrong areas. Like, I know that you're like, they're sort of like, even if the game doesn't say hostile area, I remember for a while the Tiger Claws were just like, yeah, dude, it's on fucking site right now, because you did that one mission and you murdered all of us. And I was like, okay, it's on site. But also in like my game, as long as we're nitpicking, along with like people being overly aggressive, even the cops, if they just look at me, they're like, no, you existing, that's fucking illegal right there.
Yeah, same.
They'll be
Yeah, they did that to
investigating
me
like
a lot.
a flipped car or something by the side of the road. If you just walk too close to their patrol car, the little like aggression bars start filling up and they'll start walking over to you. And if I don't just leave the area and break line of sight, they will eventually just start shooting at me. And I'm like, I didn't even do anything.
Honestly, though, that's pretty realistic.
I literally just like looked at their patrol car, and they're like, "Okay, well, you have to die now."
Yeah, realistic, but it's like, at the same time, the number of the side missions I've done for them, like, come on, you can't throw me a
They should
bone like
practically
once.
deputize me, because I've taken out like God knows how many gang members and cyber psychos, and they should make me police commissioner.
Yeah, they might be just angry at you. They might be angry at you just because you're forcing them to do more paperwork. Might be one of those dealies.
They do always talk about that in movies.
Yeah, they talk about it in Cyberpunk too. There are a few like kind of cool like NPC dialogues. If you once in a blue moon happen upon them at the right time, they'll talk about like, oh, I don't want to do the paperwork for this. If you come across the right crime scene. I was also gonna say, like, if I can continue like going along, sort of on like the way that the game forces you to work hand in hand with the cops. I feel like the set pieces lend themselves to like a more like radical politics that we are talking about earlier. That sort of comes hand in hand with the cyberpunk genre.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel like the game is super scared of being too radical, and it does.
100%. Yeah. I have specific like screenshots later that we can talk about.
Yeah.
But yeah, once we get through this. But yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. One thing I just want to bring up, even before we get to screenshots, is what the fuck is corporate colonialism? Like, not that it can't exist. Like, I could definitely point to like things in the real world, and I'd be like, that's corporate colonialism right there. But at the same time, in the terms of the game and what Johnny's fighting against, it's like, I wish they sort of respected the player enough to define some of their political theory within the game without also treating you like a fucking moron the second that you look too closely at its own theory. Which there's a certain side mission I'll bring up, but I don't know if you want to like save that later for when we're really nitpicking stuff.
So my guess on that, maybe we can just get into it now. My guess on that is I think that the developers are like the type of people that are like gamers that think politics is stupid, you know? So I think a lot of that stuff is they're just like stringing leftist jargon together to kind of make fun of it. Because, okay, one of the screenshots I saved, there's that Bart Moss Collective, which is the radical leftist organization. They have like a website with like forums in the game, and I basically saved like all the forum threads that are on there. And one of them is the best weapon against neoliberalism is uninterrupted meditation, which like I can't see that as anything but like making fun of leftists from like an outsider's perspective, because I don't think anyone would think that someone who's talking about neoliberalism like thinks that meditation is has anything to do with politics, really, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that I mean that's true. It sort of fits in within like Cyberpunk because it does have some meditation moments. It does dwell upon like the monks, for example. Like
Monks. Where were their monks? I don't
uh
remember
there
that.
there are like two big quest lines with monks. One is when monks are there's a pair of brothers and one of them has been forcefully
Oh, yeah, okay.
implanted.
Uh-huh.
And there's a second quest line where a monk guides you through a series of meditations, and out of it you get a small altar, which I don't know what the fuck you do with it,
I completely
but
missed that one then. I
yeah,
did I did the other one, the one with the two brothers.
yeah. I mean they're both possible, but I also spent like a stupid fucking amount of time because like I literally couldn't see my family this holiday season.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's just basically like a good dude gives you like a brain dance, and it's a guided meditation basically that he leads you through. And I'm not sure what you're supposed to get out of it at all, except you get that little altar thing, and it's like
gotcha.
this.
Is it like a junk item?
I haven't looked at it at all. Uh,
Okay.
to be honest, like I thought like there'd be more going on there, and then at the end of it, I was like, oh, that's neat, and I don't fucking care anymore. Let's buy a car or something.
But yeah,
Which
so here's the text of that forum post, the meditation one. It says, meditation here is a metaphor for worker unity. Fear of a corrupt government controlled by tyrannical megacorporations has led to a mutated strain of pathological hyper neoliberalism. We can't let them bully us into fear. It's time we throw off our corporate yoke. And someone responds to that and says, the truth is we're being ruled by the neo-bourgeois class. They are the ones who possess capital and the means of production. Class divisions are even deeper than they were at the beginning of the 20th century, but nobody ever talks about that.
that is true, people.
I really think they're just like making fun of leftists. There's another comment that's the anti-capitalist discourse of Swedenborg Riviera is much more complicated than it seems. He is undoubtedly here referring to an existential crisis, weaving together threads from Heidegger and Jaspers, which I think Jaspers is supposed to be like a made-up guy. Reading both of them may provide you with critical insights.
I will say though, even though they're making fun of you in Cyberpunk when they mention a lot of this stuff, it depends. I respect the way they mention theory in Cyberpunk more than they did in say like the Outer Worlds. The Outer Worlds made up Backno, who I guess is the stand-in for
Macno?
yeah, yeah, um,
Backno.
which yeah. Yeah, they basically made it up. Although I will say I kind of appreciated, although both suffer from the same thing. They're too scared to go too radical. I at least
Uh-huh.
respect the world building more because Outer Worlds really thought about misery under unfettered capitalism more than Cyberpunk did.
Uh-huh.
Cyberpunk sort of seems like old hat when I compare it to meeting the guy whose head is literally stuck in the moon hat 24/7 now. There's no real. Well, actually, there are moments like that because you do meet people like Lizzie Wizzy. I guess Atom Smasher could qualify. Those sort of like things where they're talking about transhumanism, but I'll leave that for another point. But
The only thing though, I was thinking about this this morning, like they have the political like flavor text, but I can't really think of much of anything where like other than Johnny's group, I can't think of any like political actors other than like well yeah, Johnny's group like I said, and like just like business stuff, you know, like people doing like real like business shit. And
yeah,
like even Rogue is like there needs to be a
she's only,
balance of power because it's good for business.
yeah,
She
she's
straight
only
up
in it.
says that.
Yeah, she's only in it for the biz. When you go through it, and I think of back to all the characters, really and truly, the only ones who come close to being sort of political are the Mox, because they're the group of sex workers and like artists who came
Oh
together.
yeah.
So
Mhm.
they're like sort of the head in the clouds gang
Yeah.
that would probably have the most like sort of revolutionary potential, which is sad you don't really get to interact with them on that. And even when
Mhm.
you speak to their leader, she's sort of like, "Oh, the old days of the Mox are sort of long behind us," and it's like, well, I mean, what the fuck am I playing for as like a sort of guy who wants to do radical things in a game? Um, but I will say, did you play through the Killing in the Name of mission?
Yes, although I don't remember the details that well. remember the name and yeah, the fact that I played through it, but
I mean, I remember it because it specifically pissed me off because it felt like they were trolling me specifically. Basically, basically, you play through it. It's the first time you get to interact with the Bartmoss Collective.
Oh yes, okay, yeah, I know this. Yeah, I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah, to figure
Yeah.
out.
And it's just a troll, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, at the end of going to 3 distinct places, where you have to hunt for access points to hack to find out where the next access point is, it finally leads you to Swedenborg Riviera that you mentioned earlier, the great author that you're told to read. And for some reason, Johnny fucking hates that you're on this mission. The guy who literally wanted to take a fight to Arasaka.
The guy who literally nuked someone for politics.
Yeah. Although, like, the more you get into it, like, Johnny's thing is, like, less political and more just of a fucking grudge that he had.
That's true,
rather
yeah.
than just being for, like, the ideals of it. It's more so, like, that the rocker group, when you look too closely at them, it might have just been sort of the aesthetics of, like, rockers just lent them to hating people in suits. Sort of like, I guess, like, actual, like, people in, like, mainstream punk at the end of the day.
That's like real Gen X type shit.
Yeah. Yeah, basically it can't escape Generation X.
So wow, this game is really 80s.
Yeah. Generation X never actually ends, just like the USSR in this game. And by the time you get to Swedenborg Riviera, you find out she's a puppet. Like one of those mechanical fortune tellers.
Yeah, like in Big.
Yeah, that's just been hacked to tell you all these radical things, and then somebody texts you like, haha, you've been pwned. Literally with the PWN. I haven't seen that in a long ass time.
They should have gone it with a Q at least.
And I kind of hated it because, like, even Johnny laughs at you and he was like, oh no, this is too fucking great. You gotta leave this. You gotta leave it, bro. You gotta let more people get fooled by this. And if that's the reason I didn't have a 70% friendship with Johnny, it's because I probably
Nope, because I did leave it, and I still didn't have a 70%.
On Johnny, I mean, I've only just sort of been introduced to him in the game, and I've been through the cutscene where you first get told that, like, he's going to be invading your consciousness, and then you go home and have this kind of weird fight with him in your apartment, and he tries to, like, or you try to brain yourself against the window. The very next thing I chose to do in the game was go downstairs to go and get my car. And your character, like, sits in the car next to Johnny and is, like, chatting with him like he's a friend. So, like, yeah, I don't sort of get Johnny's character at the moment. I know, like, a little bit about his backstory. He, like, bombed the Arasaka building, but it's weird because, like, I've just had this fight with Johnny where, like, I was screaming at him and telling him I'm going to kill him, and then the next thing I do is I sit down in my car and, you know, a taxi, like, you know,
what's up, dude?
Yeah, exactly. V was just like, something doesn't feel right, Johnny, and he's like, oh yeah, you think? That's like, but hang on, are we on talking terms now? I think the last thing I said to you was, I'm going to fucking kill you. And now it's just like, oh, hey, dude, like, that was pretty weird with that taxi, right?
Yeah, it's weird because there is a way they recommend you to do the, like, or, like, I've heard there's a recommended order to do the missions, and, like, that might be such a small thing that they expect you to have another moment with Johnny where he finally is like, you know what? I changed my mind about you. You know what? You're going to be Bill now. I'll be Ted, and we're going on an excellent adventure, dude.
Yeah, I think I was meant to go and meet Takemura, but instead I've done literally everything other than that. I wanted to go and, like, visit Jackie's parents and go and get my reward from Wakako, and so, like, Takemura has been waiting for me for, like, several days now in game, but I think I was probably meant to do that first.
Me and John apparently like him. You might think he's just like a boss that you had, honestly. You might not like him that much because you've probably met someone like him.
Yeah, he's just sort of endearing because he's also, in his later state, he's just a fish out of water, and he's like a good, like, dude, just generally, because, like, he's big on honor and everything, and he's like basically I guess a Ronin now. He's lost his master. He's wandering the countryside, or rather, he's wandering Night City, trying to get his bearings again. But he won't forget like the pride that he once had doing his old job. So it's like he was like one of the more interesting characters, and it also helps that your first introduction to him, or rather, your first introduction when working together with him, isn't him grabbing control of your body and trying to brain you.
Yeah,
So,
I did like playing through that sequence where you sort of see things from his perspective, and it does feel like it feels very cool, kind of like strutting through the building, just blowing people away with this like ridiculously OP.
Oh yeah,
handgun.
that was definitely one of my favorite parts. Yeah, that was great.
yeah, it's the game hinting at you is like, if you build your character right, you too can kill people with one pistol shot.
Which I did. Hooray.
Yeah, like in the Fallout games, I always go for like a fast talking like gunslinger, because I love just like the idea of having just a big pistol. So yeah, like seeing that gun, while I'm like blowing away all these Arasaka guys, the thing I was thinking was like, okay, where do I get this gun?
So just real quick to wrap up the politics part. So in that Killing in the Name of mission, I forgot I had this screenshot of like some of the text messages that you get. And this is more of the like jargon strung together type of stuff. One of them is, who that goes in search of me has already torn off the bourgeois corporate blinders from their eyes and taken the first step toward the hanging garden of post-capitalism. Just very fucking strange sentence. And then in the next message it says, the road to the stars is always paved with darkness, and the road to collectivism leads through a sea of blood. Will you hide your tail between your legs and fasten your corporate leash once more? So, I mean, I guess in this case, it's, someone trolling you, so that could be, like, the explanation for why it's just, like, jargon strung together, and, like, for people like us, we're probably like, well, this is fucking stupid, this is bullshit. But maybe in this one case it's excusable, but it's just so similar to, like, a lot of the other posts that, I don't know. I really think they're just like vague right-wingers that think politics is stupid. And I think it's backed up by the fact that they do this with film analysis as well. There's a shard that I found that's talking about the Bushido film franchise. It's basically like someone overanalyzing something where they say like, this groundbreaking film series puts on full display the entire spectrum of American society, masterfully pointing out the greatest problems of the neo-modern era. And then, like, the next sentence is, like, the director once revealed in an interview how he fucking loves it when hot chicks dissect the shit out of the bad guys. Kind of saying that, like, people who do film analysis are stupid or they overanalyze stuff too much. I think it's, like, I think those are two facets of the same, like, kind of belief system.
Yeah, it's the same sort of satire, but at the same time, I will admit that this game can make fun of me for film satire, at least, because I did like the Star Wars ring theory post when it came out. So I will admit.
I mean, it's not that there's not an element of truth in those things, but,
Yeah, I'm just mad that, like, even though that it's like it sort of gets there sometimes, Johnny. Even though after playing through the whole game with him, I don't love him all the time, because sometimes he'll turn into like a rampant misogynist.
Yeah.
Like, say for the time you're trying to...
Basically everyone is in the game.
Oh, yeah. I mean, basically the first time. And then it, like, takes a minute, and then they're like, you know what? I got to know this particular woman, or I got to know, like, these women, and you know what? I've decided they're not that bad. But, Johnny, the whole time, you're dealing with the Dolls Club, if you remember that, with Judy's set of quests.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like you're about to recreate the mocks, and you think Johnny, being a punk rocker, at the very least could understand a group of people trying to fight back against like a system of patriarchy or something, or sex workers standing up for themselves. But no, he's just like, dumb whores this, dumb whores that, the whole fucking time. And it's like, I don't know, can you pop a beta blocker right now and just like go through this? Cause
yeah.
Jesus Christ, Johnny.
Plus the slang term for girlfriend in the game is so fucking nasty. Output, I don't know if it's worse or almost as bad as whole, but it's so close, it's hard to decide.
It is for both genders. You can apply it either way.
I guess, but
it's not any better. It's not any better.
It's weird that in 2077 they've like reinvented brand new terms for top and bottom, which already exist. but they've made it all computery because it's the future.
Can we also talk? I might circle back to politics at some point because I'm not done. But before we do that, can we just talk about like how prudish this game gets sometimes? I thought there'd be a lot more sex.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of disappointed for a game which in 2018 apparently was talking about how nudity would be central to the game to display the transhumanism of the future. Basically bait and switched you with a character that it's sometimes funny to Donald Duck on the inventory screen. And basically that's the only nudity you get. And even though the nudity is there so you can see how inhuman your character gets over time, and you have to ask yourself, is this character still a human, or has he become something more, or does it matter if you have your natural body parts or not? Which sort of ties now into like the monk quests with the like the forced implants. You never really get to see a transformation. Like I basically was like had every cyberware thing tricked out, and even if you had to go back from butt naked, you don't really see it that much of a difference, regardless of what you have equipped.
Even if you have fucking swords in your arms.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I will say, the other thing is like, it just seems like a huge lie that you needed nudity in the first place, because there are certain characters, like Lizzie Wizzy, which is the full chrome singer, voiced by Grimes in the game.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, she does like a big crime noir mission, which is kind of cool.
Well, I just didn't know that she was voiced by Grimes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But for everyone, like she basically has the one good like crime noir story in it, or like Adam Smasher, for example, who's basically just seems to be the same guy, like a Darth Vader character, who's more machine than man, or the Maelstroms. To a lesser extent, the animals, who I want whatever gear they're on, because they are fucking jacked. I wish I could make my character look like that. But regardless of what you do to your character, there's no major transformation. It's more so centered on the idea of the relic, which maybe it's just me, but playing through it, now having been at the end of it, it never really makes too big of a deal of, like, is an engram a person? Is an AI a person? There are those moments where it's like, you meet this character called Alt Cunningham, who was a person turned into an AI because they got their soul ripped out, similar to Johnny, but they went out into the spooky internet beyond the black wall. And now they're basically a deity-like figure as long as you're online. And it just never feels like the engrams are really more than people or less than a person, you know? So I feel like it doesn't even tackle transhumanism in that respect either. So, like, basically to circle around, I just want to ask, why can't you get, like, sexy brain dances? Why is everything fucking snuff in this game? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. And they also didn't do anything interesting with gender at all, even though you could sort of customize it, but not really.
Yeah, like, the most you can do is basically make your genitals not match your body, which is, like, sort of cool, but when you still tie it to... if you have a female voice or a male voice, I guess it's in the issue of budget, but I don't know.
This is one of the things that I think drew me and a lot of other trans people to the game. I'm transgender, and one of the things that I think was quite exciting for a lot of trans and non-binary people was that this game allows us to create characters that have bodies like our own, and that was quite exciting, and I was kind of interested in what they were going to do with that. That's a pretty big thing to feature in a game, and to have said that they were going to make the nudity such a central part of the experience, and I was kind of cautiously excited about, like, what's this going to do? What are they going to do with this? What are they going to say about this? And then, like, when they released that tech demo, they had that advert that's, like, pretty infamous online of...
Oh, that they stole from that woman?
They stole from a woman?
Yeah, there was some woman who posted a picture on Twitter that became an ad in the game that's, like, all over the place. And they didn't pay her for it or anything. They just, like, stole it and put it in the game.
What I was going to say was the Chromaticore advert of the woman standing, like, lighting a cigarette or something. And the advert says, like, mix it up, 16 different flavors. Oh, okay, I think that's stolen.
Mm-hmm. I think they basically just, like, rasterized it and then, like, edited it a little bit. And the actual person in the picture posted it on Twitter recently and was like, hey, that's me, and like that's my picture, and they just took it and put it in the game without asking me or anything.
That's pretty messed up. I had no idea about that. I remember around that time when that tech demo and that advert was seen in the game, they kind of justified it by saying that in the fiction of the game world, this trans person's body is being sort of fetishized and used to sell soda pop, basically.
Yeah.
And a lot of trans people were like, oh, this is a bit sort of uncomfortable, using trans people's bodies as sort of like fetish objects. Certainly it's very on brand for like a sort of capitalist, consumerist hellscape of the future. And it's similar to, what we have now in adverts, using like minorities and using women's bodies to, romanticize and exoticize products and sell products. So it's not like it doesn't fit with the theme of the world, but what happened immediately after that was people sort of criticized them, and whoever runs their social media on Twitter, like CDPR's social media, started kind of making edgy gender jokes. And I think that really like put a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, because it was like, you're maybe trying to make a commentary on the use of trans people's bodies and identities to sell a product, whilst not actually really caring about their voices, their experiences. But then you're actually doing this in real life, like not as a satire. You are using a trans person's like image to scandalize and titillate in your game, whilst also not listening to trans people who are criticizing the way this is being handled. And the fact that it wasn't clear, and I don't think it is clear, whether any trans people were involved in those decisions, like how that was going to be handled in the game. So it's weird that CDPR like seemingly wanted to say something about gender or wanted to do something here, but then ultimately have nothing to say about it. Their commentary on it goes as far as, oh, isn't it terrible that this very sexy person is being used to sell soda? Isn't that dreadful? And it's kind of like, well, yeah, but why do you think it's bad? That's what does the game have to say about that beyond just the sort of featuring of it in their world? And I just basically think like they probably shouldn't have gotten involved in any of this, because to make such an effort to kind of include and to like center the idea of being able to customize your body and customize your character, and then say ultimately nothing about trans and non-binary people. What's their political status in Night City? There's almost no other visibility of that whatsoever. I think if they weren't really going to say or do anything about it, why go out of their way to include that stuff in the first place? It just seems like a very high risk for no reward.
Cynical
well, quite
PR
possibly,
grab.
yeah. It might have just literally been, that kind of, we're going to use this to shift units on our game and cause a controversy. And as well, yeah, as we were saying about the gender stuff being tied to your voice is, once again, like I can create a character, and I have created a character with a body like mine, but I can't create a character that has a masculine voice to go with a more feminine body, because the game will just basically, it masks that binary, that decision of male or female behind what voice you choose, rather than what body shape or what genitals you pick. And then as well, like to only have 2 different penises to choose from is like, I think they really missed the boat there. I mean, I thought we were going to be able to choose, you can choose like the size, but you want length, width, texture. You can choose whether you're
Femininity.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you want to be able to choose all these kind of things. I mean,
Tucked, untucked.
Exactly. I was hoping you'd be able to put like stat points into like, what status effect your cum inflicts on people.
Definitely not enough sliders, and also things you can tech into basically over the game to affect your penis, to change it. Definitely, if there were cybernetics for your penis, that also would have been a lot of fun, I felt like, too.
Yeah, I mean, what ultimately what I wanted was to be able to have machine guns in my tits as well, but weirdly enough, that's not
I was
an
just
option.
thinking that, yeah.
Yeah, you can put them in your arms. Like, I feel like it's not too far to start putting them in other places, too. So.
Right. I mean, a lot of the character creation stuff doesn't really matter because you barely
outside
ever
of
see
the
yourself.
inventory screen, if you actually take all your clothes off and then look down, you get forced to wear this sort of like weird foil underwear that like covers you up. So it's like, well, is this just for like a joke every few, whenever I change my underwear or whatever in the inventory screen, I get treated to a little meat spin for a few seconds.
And if you wear any headgear, it basically like takes away whatever hairstyle you had. Like I was saying when we were talking before we started recording, like a lot of times I ended up bald, and I had like little mini dysphoria episodes where I was like, I don't look like a woman anymore. What the fuck? I look like a weird bald guy.
Yeah, I get some weird glitches with riding motorcycles. Sometimes when I pause the game, the physics engine kind of goes crazy.
I watched the video earlier. I'm gonna put the video in the show description because it's so funny.
Oh, that's nuts! It just like completely deletes my head. But I also get it where my character's hair will kind of like fly off in different directions, and I can see my character's skull, and it is like quite weird. And I've also had it happen several times where when I'm changing my character's clothes, it doesn't render her genitals. So I don't know, the game sort of like loads in your character model and then has to decide like what genitals to display, and then like covers them up anyway with your clothes. I'm just like wondering what was the point in any of this? Like what does it affect at all? Like why did they want to include this? It sort of worked as a marketing thing because it is one of the things that made me interested in the game even before I saw the glitch compilations on Twitter. But ultimately I feel like, I guess it's related to what you were saying, how I get the feeling that the game developers or the game writers are people who think that politics is kind of stupid.
Yeah.
They ultimately
and they seem a little puritanical too with respect to this sexual stuff.
Yeah, like they have nothing ultimately to say.
Mm-hmm.
They make a lot of the kind of leftist politics sound like sort of pretentious mysticism and, stringing kind of jargon words together, whilst also wanting to be sort of anti-establishment and have this kind of punk aesthetic.
Oh, and I forgot, there's one thing they unironically care about, which is small business. Because there's a few missions, I think 2 of the Cyber Psycho missions are like small business guys who got like screwed over by the big corporations. Okay.
It's just so weird for them to, I don't know, to like include these kind of really big ideas, but then to ultimately, end up at the sort of, to be charitable, you could say it's a sort of like centrist liberal position of, this is all actually fine, and the people who are really causing problems are the ones who are taking everything too seriously. Like all these, these like theory people who are posting on this forum. I was looking at the screenshots you sent. One of these kind of pretentious online posters is called Professor Socrates.
Yeah. Carl Forever. That one's pretty accurate, actually.
There's clearly a sort of like anti-intellectual bent to it. I mean, even one of the commenters on that forum, like a person who is actually posting on this forum comments with "Don't shit yourselves thinking too hard, book nerds."
That's Chloe.
And like, there is, that kind of stuff does happen online as well. Like in like genuine leftist circles, there are people who have spent their entire lives kind of reading loads of books and have never engaged in any politics. I've never engaged in politics because if all you've ever done is read, then that's like whatever. But yeah, it sort of seems from the outside, it's like a view of leftist politics from the outside looking in. It's all just like people arguing with each other and using pretentious words.
Right. Maybe if they didn't have so much crunch, they would have time to like read some books to figure out what to say.
Well, the only other thing I have to add to that is it's got what I guess you could call the Watch Dogs problem. Like Watch Dogs 2 especially had like some very interesting like political themes to it, but ultimately stopped short of really saying anything politically radical. Like, the characters would talk in very broad strokes terms about how, all this like social media and surveillance technology and the Internet of Things with this kind of really, this invasive culture of technology was sort of taking over, and that, having all of this data and information and access to our lives in the hands of big corporations, and it being done explicitly to drive profits and stuff was all really bad. But then ultimately, like the missions that you'd get given and the conclusion of the storyline was that it's not capitalism's fault. It's the fact that this CEO is bad. And if we just like get rid of him and replace him with another CEO, then it's all fine, actually. For them, the problem isn't that their Facebook analog has all this access to your data and is making money off of trying to influence you, even politically. The problem is that it's a bad person trying to do this. They're kind of Mark Zuckerberg stand-in. Like, he's just a bad guy.
I've always wanted to come up with a term for that relates to Jacobites, because I feel like it's very similar to the Jacobites.
Yeah. Cyberpunk has that as well, is that, the problem ultimately isn't with the fact that the corporations have so much power and are basically like kind of militarized. That's not the problem. The problem is that the main guy, Saburo, who runs Arasaka, the problem is he's a bad guy, and that his son is a bad guy. And if you were to just get rid of these bad people, then actually it's fine to have this gigantic corporation that seems to have more power and more presence.
You need to get a CEO that doesn't care so much about money. That's the problem.
Yeah. And it's sort of like really deflates the radical angles they could have in it, where...
Yeah. It's actually really similar to this as well as Assassin's Creed.
I have not played Assassin's Creed since the second one.
Okay. You're playing a character who's like in this kind of like brotherhood of people who are like political radicals, essentially, who like their main praxis is literally assassinating people, but then like you're basically just like, we got to get the bad people out of power and put the good people in power.
Yeah, it ends up not being a criticism of power in and of itself.
It's a conspiratorial view, essentially.
Yeah.
The same thing happened in Outer Worlds too. Basically, you get rid of the bad people, and look, there's a ship full of people who are good that you should put in charge, and actually the Iconoclasts absolutely cannot work across the universe. Stop asking us about that. And that's what pissed me off about that ending. I will say that Cyberpunk, as you get to its endings, at the very least, does not go that hard into the only thing you need to change is the CEO. I will salute them for just, like, they know that politics isn't their bag, so eventually they treat it as window dressing and stay away from it. But I will also say, like, for all the content that you could come across, and there are so many fucking shards, basically, that those are the books of the world, where you have all your flavor text and stuff, if you're not on websites. The interesting ones are basically, it's either, like, the political stuff, or it's the text messages from Bart Moss. That stuff I could actually read through and it doesn't feel like a day job. Or it was that one time I found a Johnny Silverhand fan fiction where him and Carrie Eurodyne became gay, and that was extremely good to read. That was good as hell. I wish they had more of that stuff in there, but it stops short, and it sort of like knows it too, because unless you're looking at Johnny's past, it doesn't really bring it up, and it's only like, yeah, these are the bad guys, don't work with them, but your problems are never really, we should fight corporations. It never gets to that point. It's always just like, I'm about to fucking die. I need to figure out what the fuck's going to happen to me.
There's also a lot of, I hate to use this term, because I think it's like way overused, but there's a lot of hyperrealism in the game where they're like, no matter what you do, it's basically pointless. Like, there's no way that you can change anything. Even if you were to carry out a nuclear attack against Arasaka, it doesn't change shit. And I mean, they definitely obviously like don't talk about like organizing groups of people to fight back, other than that mission with Judy.
The Aldecados as well.
Yeah, like, even in those missions, the ending is basically like, oh, it's pointless to try and do that stuff because power always wins.
One of the things I wrote down before we started this call was that I've forgotten where the saying comes from, but the saying is something like, punk is about claiming victory whilst conceding defeat.
Yeah.
It seems like there's elements of that in Cyberpunk, this idea that you can't really do anything about the corporations having so much power and people sort of not really seeing any problems with the city they're living in. But what you can do is just like stick your finger up to it. You know, there's that like famous interview with the Sex Pistols where the TV interviewer is like asking them questions and they like saying naughty swear words and not showing any interest in talking to him. But like ultimately they're appearing on TV to try and promote their band. They are fully within the system that they supposedly hate. So they've lost, like, from the very get-go, like they've already kind of conceded that point, but they get to kind of like feel smug about it. There's a point to be made there somewhere about how that ties into the kind of modern, like, I guess, right-wing understanding of punk, is that
It's just guys that hate their dads, basically.
well, yeah, I mean, like, you could see, like, Donald Trump's presidency as this attempt at a sort of right-wing punk movement. They wanted to be really anti-establishment, but actually Trump, for example, was never going to be that anti-establishment and ended up just kind of, like, capturing the establishment. But they got to feel like they were putting their finger up for a period of time. So they ultimately, like, don't actually gain anything from this movement, but you kind of get to feel like you've said your piece.
Yeah, it's I guess it's the idea that you can't really do anything radical while you're making money.
Yeah, this is a pretty big company, right? So, like, yeah, they couldn't really, even if they wanted to say something that radical, I'm sure that their bosses would probably be like, hey, you gotta cut that shit out, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, like, as it tells the story of basically overbearing corporations, it's made by an overbearing corporation,
Right.
which ruined itself to sell more stuff. Like, the funny through line through this thing is, like, as much as people want to talk about, like, it's a disappointment, it didn't change gaming the way they said it would, it doesn't even have the same features they mentioned in all these E3 demos in 2016, 18, and other times they've done demos or shown, like, what the features will be, or done interviews or the night lines. The funniest thing to me is, like, there are people who should be legitimately pissed off because CD Projekt Red actually got government subsidies for this game to the tune of like 7.5 million USD.
So they, like,
Technically, it's,
accidentally
like,
made a
Polish
radical
money.
statement through the game failing and, like, all these bad labor practices, stronger than anything they could have said in the game, really.
Yeah, basically, it's an affront to, like, how much capitalism will ruin stuff, because the things it received the funding for, and I'll just name them real quick. It's a city creation for more realistic cities, something that feels like a living, breathing thing, which, I mean, I don't know if this is the most realistic city you've played in, but, I mean, beyond, like, the cinematic points, it's like it doesn't really come together. A second thing they got the grant for was seamless multiplayer, which, congrats on releasing your single-player only game.
Yeah.
And the third and fourth are cinematic feel, which maybe during some of the cutscenes, and animation excellence, which sometimes, but you need to not glitch, which even on PC, like, there were some funny glitches that sort of canceled point 3 and 4 kind of hard when you're playing through them. So,
Yeah, like, the first cinematic type sequence that I was in where I was, like, actually in control was, like, that car chase where Jackie's driving and you're shooting at the people chasing you. That just completely fucked up for me. The enemies didn't even, like, stick their heads out of the car, but they were still shooting at me, and it didn't play any of the dialogue from that sequence until after enemies had been defeated, which I didn't do. Like, I shot at them and didn't hit a single one because I couldn't see them. And that didn't matter. They still, like, crashed somehow. And then all of the dialogue from that played in, like, 3 seconds. So that kind of took me out. But I do feel like at a lot of points, like, it did feel very immersive and cinematic. You know, I think part of that is the fact that it's all in first person. I felt like it was more happening to me. But yeah, like, I have a bunch of screenshots of glitches that happened during cutscenes and conversations and stuff that you can see if you're listening. Click on the show notes. One of my favorite ones was in one of the missions with Pan Am. You're trying to shoot down an AV and you, like, hack it and it doesn't quite come down. So Pan Am shoots it with a stinger, but the actual launcher didn't load for me right away. So the missile just came out of her hands. And then the stinger loaded when she got into the car. So, like, that whole rest of that sequence, she was, like, driving around and talking to me and, like, looking at the car and stuff with a stinger sticking out of her hand. It's really funny.
Oh, I've been handed invisible guns by almost every NPC that, like, gives you a gun. Like, every one of those set-piece scripted sequences, like, Takemura is, like, driving you away from the dump. He just passed me an invisible gun. Like, Jackie has done the same. He's just, like, passed me invisible guns. They never seem to render until, like, I've been using them for a few seconds. in those sequences. And I don't know whether that's like a PS4 thing or I'm just getting unlucky with the surrender.
I'm momentarily, like, I think on the first patch they put through for my game, and it's probably like super selective about which games it does this to, because like everyone will have a slightly different rig when it comes to computers. But for my game, there was like a patch where the pistol was just invisible, so I'd be holding a clip, and I'd see him hold the clip, but the actual pistol itself was just like literally invisible.
Here's some bullets that you can shoot out if you had a gun.
I mean, he made it work. I will give V that. Is that
must be one of your implants.
He made it work. Yeah.
One of you, I think it was John, also mentioned the soundtrack. I definitely have to agree with that. I was thinking of the exact same game as you too. Like the Vice City soundtrack is like the benchmark that I judge almost every game against. That game introduced me to Kool and the Gang. That they had that fucking awesome Kool and the Gang song in there, and none of the songs in the game are really very good. The Us Cracks song, the one that's in Japanese, like it's kind of fun.
If you blaspheme Us Cracks on this show, I will drive over to you and mess you up and quick hack your thing right now. I would die for Us Cracks. I'm very mad there weren't more Us Cracks interactions in the game.
You know what though? I was very disappointed to find out that they in the game are not really Japanese. They're just like white girls doing like cultural appropriation.
Are they?
Yes. Yeah. I don't know if you did the mission with.
No, I did.
Carrie tries to stop their concert and they like are talking in Japanese and stuff, and then they like break out of character when you show up with guns, and they're like, "Oh my god, blah blah blah."
Oh really?
They're definitely white girls.
I just thought like that's just like the way they talked. You know, sometimes depending on who you learn English from, you'll pick up that accent from them. Like the way that Hana.
Maybe, but I think they look like white girls as well.
I mean, they do, yeah, but. I mean, what are you gonna do in 2077? Still gotta market to people, you know. You gotta push the records. Gotta move units, you know.
Yeah, I can put a screenshot in the doc, and people can judge for themselves. But yeah,
But I would say, like, getting back to the music, the soundtrack kind of alright. I liked it, like the original stuff. Isn't too bad on its own. But the thing that really like lost it for me is not just like that they didn't have good songs and stuff, like, because I'll say like the combat music is nice the first 4 or 5 times you hear everything, but if you get in enough combat situations, you will hear enough battle music to be like, okay, I can basically, like, you know, I'll be humming this for the next 3 days because now it's just stuck in my head. But like for the radio stuff, which is like really where you make or break an open world game with cars. It's like it's not like listening to the radio. Like I wouldn't sit in my car to listen through the radio, like just do its thing, which is like, I feel like you can do that. I feel like it's pretty possible. I don't think that Vice City had well, I don't know what they did to get the radio the way they did, but all their DJs like had through lines. They had like little stories or vignettes in between each song that were like, oh man, this is interesting.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, they didn't do that really at all.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just music.
They would occasionally,
which in a corporate world they didn't even have like commercials on the radio, which is fucking weird.
Yeah, they'd occasionally break it up for a WNS announcement after like whatever last mission you did, and you fuck up something with Arasaka. They might announce that happened, or they'll announce something else big happening. But it's just like it's not enough, you know. I need more. Give me some juice. Give me some lore building. Give me something deep here. But it's just,
I ended up meeting the music after like, I don't know, 15 hours and just listening to Hong Kong Express.
I honestly would have found a way to mute it and then just play Pump Punch It on replay, because that was my absolute favorite thing, and I freaked out a little bit when they played the music video. So
the radio stations in the cars are very sort of samey. It seems like there's, I mean, I didn't count, there's like 10 radio stations, but basically they seem like sort of really middle of the road pop metal, or one radio station seemed to be...
one weird jazz
I
station.
didn't even see that. There was one station that seemed to be basically be sort of like doom or like drone. It was just, I don't know, it was just noise, like harsh noise, basically.
Oh, I must have missed that one. No hip-hop.
There's hip-hop.
Oh, there is? Okay.
There are a few...
Oh, yeah, the Haitian one or whatever?
Because like sometimes it'll do like hip-hop, but it will do it in all languages. So once or twice you might get... I think I might have heard... I forget what his name is. Saul something?
Oh, the Aldecado?
No, not the Aldecado. I was trying to think of the guy's name who did something with like Trent Reznor once. But
okay.
there's also like Run the Jewels is in there. They have a song. I don't remember too many others because there's a Spanish rapper. I'm pretty sure there's like a Polish or Russian rapper in there. So like they have like a smattering of hip hop. It's just not like, it's not the real shit,
Yeah.
I don't know.
There was a song playing at the Voodoo Boys area that was hip hop that was really cool. That I think was in Creole. But that's the only one I can remember. Anything else you wanted to add?
I think I've been through the radio like once when I was on like a long drive. It all just seemed like, this is sort of like elevator music. The real takeaway from the soundtrack has been, as it was said before, that combat music, that kind of like 10 or 15 second loop of music that just seems to play over and over and over again. And since if you stumble into an area with like really high level enemies, like combat can last like a really decent amount of time if you want to sort of wear them down because the AI are too stupid to like walk around a corner. So you can just like throw like 20 grenades around a corner and slowly chip away at their health. But doing that whilst listening to this like music that's just on repeat, it sort of does drive home the monotony of some of the gameplay sometimes. The music sort of like exacerbates it.
Yeah, I mean, like the sad part about this game is like there are cinematic moments, there are immersive moments, but the bulk of the game is probably running to places. If you want to do like all the blue things, that would be the bulk of your game time. But like even then,
they'll also be like way below your level though.
They'll either be like way below, or if you're just starting out, you'll accidentally leave the Watson area and you'll be like, why the hell do these guys take 600 rounds before I kill one of them? And then you'll come back like 20 levels later and you're like, why are these guys paper bags? It's weird. There's like no sort of, it never really feels good until like,
level scaling is very bad.
Well, there's no way to determine, as far as I've seen anyway, what level enemies are. Like you can scan them and get their like weaknesses.
It's
and
sort
crimes,
of
but
indicated by the color of their icon. Like if it's red, they're much higher. If it's yellow, they're on the same level as you. If it's green, they're below, and if it's gray, they're very below.
Okay, well, I've never noticed that.
They never tell you that.
I judge whether I'm going to be able to take people out by like doing a quick hack on them and seeing whether it either kills them in one hit or like chips away at their health.
Yeah. And speaking of quick hacking, I accidentally like took almost all of the fun out of the combat by making my build too good. So I did like John quick hacking build with really high crit, and there's a perk that you can get with quick hacking that lets you crit with your quick hacks, and there's another one that lets you hack through walls. So all I would have to do is like ping anything in a base, so like a forklift or a tire balancing machine or whatever, and it would highlight every single enemy, and I could just use contagion on them and it would kill all of them in like 1 or 2 pips. So it would take me like under 45 seconds every time to like wipe out an entire base from like a corner somewhere where I don't even have to see any of them.
I was getting there in the starting area, but now I've gone to some different areas in the game, and suddenly quick hacking is not viable. But I've found that the most consistent way to kill enemies is to like shoot them with a shotgun, and they will often like ragdoll into the scenery. And as soon as any part of their body sort of clips into the scenery, that's it. They're just paralyzed. I've got 2 different clips on Twitter that of me doing that, of like ragdolling an enemy, and they just lie there, like still doing their.
Yeah, they really didn't move.
Yeah, they're doing their voice lines, and they're like barking at you. Even after you've taken their health down to 0, so you'll like get the little pop up that says you've completed this little mission. They're dead, but then they'll still carry on like yelling at you. It's so bizarre, but it's a really like.
That must be a race condition because of the PS4 limitations or something.
Quite possibly, but I found that like the AI is very exploitable, and it doesn't take much going wrong for them to just basically give up on trying to fight you.
Yeah, a lot of times they'll just stand still. If they're supposed to be fighting you, they'll just stand in one spot, and you have to like go look for them because you'll still be in combat.
Yeah, you can get them to basically like all congregate in a single area, and they won't come any further out of that area, so you can like kite them into a certain area and then just leave, and they'll all just gather in that one area, and then you wipe them out with grenades.
The only time combat was hard really was like in the ending mission. There were parts where like enemies would actually spawn, because most of the time the enemies are like already where they're supposed to be by the time you get to the area. But in the ending mission that I played, they would actually like spawn out of nowhere. And so my strategy of just hiding in a corner and killing everything with contagion wouldn't work because they wouldn't exist yet. And that actually made it harder. So maybe they should have done that more often.
It's disappointing how often the game, like even the main story missions, like you'll be sneaking around and doing things stealthy, but once it transitions into shooting mode, the game just becomes a very sort of like, it becomes like a stop and pop shooting gallery. With a few like interesting spells you can cast on enemies, basically. A better hacking mechanic in a game was in like the PS2 Ghost in the Shell game.
I never played that one.
You could take control of enemies and kind of get them to like shoot their friends. So you could actually like cyber hack someone's brain.
Yeah, so that would be cool because they did that with turrets. You could do that with turrets in the game, and that was really fun. But then also like as soon as you start shooting at the enemies with a turret that you take control of, they just like pinpoint you instantly and start shooting at you.
Yeah, it's weird that they know where you are. Because like a turret's gone berserk, they immediately just like use their spider senses and realize where you are.
I'm a big computer nerd, so I wish they went much crazier with hacking and made it like almost like Shenzhen IO or something. But obviously that wouldn't be very practical for like a blockbuster game.
I think that one of the better models for how computer hacking can be made into a game mechanic is Uplink from the people that did Darwinia and DEFCON. Like it's a very sort of like 90s style presentation of hacking. But yeah, you have to buy specific programs that do specific things, and there are different like system architectures that you either do or do not have the tools to break into. But then also you need to have programs.
That's cool.
You need to like manage your memory on your like your hacking machine, so that you can be able to do things like erase the logs on servers that you've tampered with. So like whilst you're like copying the data and like sending it somewhere else, you also want to be able to have enough RAM to be able to like delete entries in the logs so that you're not traceable. And being able to log into multiple.
This game's on sale for $250. Is it worth $250?
I would say it's definitely worth that. Uplink is very fun. It's a very cheesy presentation of hacking in computer games, but it does take that idea of what a hacker is in a movie and turns it into a game mechanic, into something that is actually worth engaging with, and not hacking as it appears in so many games, which is it's a skill that you level up, but basically you just push square and then maybe do like a mini game, and then you've hacked into it.
Right.
Yeah, it requires a little bit more thought, and you need to have specific components and specific techniques, and it's about having the programs, but also knowing how to use them and what to use them for, and the most efficient way to use your resources to break into systems. So yeah, like that's the model for like hacking in a video game.
Yeah, that sounds cool. So one last thing I want to get to, because I think we can start wrapping up, is just like the dystopian aspects of the game. One of the things that I was thinking about, like through my whole playthrough, was like, what are the actual differences between cyberpunk society and ours that aren't just like related to technology? Because for the most part, the dystopian aspects are like, oh, corporations are militarized, which that sounds dystopian to us just because of the particular era that we're in. But like for the majority of history, corporations were militarized. You know, there were like literal wars with people shooting at each other with guns fought over like labor rights. And like companies like the East India Company had like full on militaries of their own. So like what do you guys think are aspects of the game that are like actually dystopian and not just like an aesthetically different reflection of our
actually in a lot of ways
in?
The game presents itself as being this, you know, this dystopia, but it's actually pretty nice in a lot of ways. And like three specific points there would be in the quote, I touched on it already, but the quote unquote acceptance of trans people in Night City is kind of way better than we have. I mean, certainly on Rainy TERF Island, where I'm, well, Rainy TERF Plague Island at the moment. The fact that no one ever mentions trans people, but they clearly exist because my character is a trans person. You know, that's kind of way better than we have now in certain places in the world. There's also like, you wrote something about like the like trash and the decay of different parts of the city. There's some underpasses I walked through in the game where there's like piles and piles of like litter, and I guess we're meant to think this is like the kind of the underbelly of you know, all the waste products of this like consumerism and capitalism of the city above. But honestly, like there are just places in Tokyo that are exactly the same as that. So I lived in Japan for a few years, and there are absolutely like underpasses in Tokyo that are like have sacks of trash like stacked up as tall as a person, because it can go and dump your trash there and no one will see you doing it, and then you just leave. The rest of the city is kind of grimy in a way and run down or dilapidated, but is also really shiny and neon. Like the city I live in right now has all of the kind of grime and dirt of Night City, but none of the neon signage. So yeah, I mean, I guess in a lot of ways, like they've tried.
Maybe it's because it's like a new city.
I mean, what they've tried to do is they've tried to create this kind of dystopian world, but I guess when you are going to try and do this, you have to make sure, because they wanted to include like all the cool sci-fi stuff. But what they've actually ended up doing in certain places is making a dystopia that's actually better than aspects of our world. And so it stops being a dystopia. And you know there's the meme that gets shared around to do with Gundam quite a lot, where, you know, there's like the Gundam is like firing a laser beam, and like the beam is like arcing over the person's head. And it says like, you know, child soldiers are bad, and like perpetual war and colonialism, and there's all these like points being made by Gundam, but then like the fan is just like the beam is going right over his head and he's just looking at the robot saying like, cool robot. Robot. Cyberpunk sometimes feels like that. It's like maybe it's trying to have these kind of themes and ideas in it, but it's accidentally used like an aesthetic that's way too cool, and also like I think we were talking earlier about how, you know, ripping out your body parts and replacing them and stuff should be something like really poses a deep moral question, I guess, of like, you know, at what point do you stop being human? And these surgeries that your character can have, some of them are really quite invasive, like having your eyeball ripped out of your head whilst you're basically just sitting on an operating chair. You're never asked to confront like what is that doing to you as a human, but also as a person. Like, you know, if that kind of like...
Yeah, it's more like getting a new exhaust in your car.
Self-commodifying that way and treating yourself as a sort of tool and your body as a tool to kind of better do your work. I mean, your character literally says when you first meet the Ripper Doc is like, I need the best hardware to be able to do the job. I mean, your character fully sees themselves as just a worker and I need to now transform my body in order to better do my work. But like the technology you get is really cool, and it never kind of gives you any sort of consequence to having done this to yourself.
So there is one small part where they sort of bring that up. One of the missions you do with Judy, you like go into this like seedy Ripper Doc's clinic, and there's people that are waiting there that are like that are poor, and so their cyberware is like really cheap and kind of like falling apart, and the Ripper Doc like specifically helps out poorer people with their hardware. And so like they sort of touch on like, hey, this is really invasive and it can like fuck you up really bad, to the point of like people's like skin is falling off essentially, but you really don't see a lot of that. And that's the only moment that I can think of where they even talk about it. And it's not even very gruesome. It just looks like they have like craters in their skin. It looks like they have like young Stalin style
there's
pock
one other
marks
instance
or
of it,
something.
like
you
one of
know,
the first missions where you go into like a kind of chop shop where they're abducting people and cutting them open to like steal their mods.
Oh,
but
true.
that theme seems to kind of vanish pretty fast and doesn't really come back that much.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I mean, it's. I would say it's temporarily there. Like all the cyberpsychosis stuff that Regina, your first fixer, sends you on. I mean, it's supposedly happening either because they had the wrong drug cocktail, which the Aldecados, some of them are veterans of the actual corporate wars that are fought, and you find out Johnny's like sort of the same way. Like you'll find out that like some people just have these things done to them. Either it's like the monk who has these implants invasively given to him, so he sees himself as a lesser person, or there's one cyberpsychosis victim where it's like there are twin sisters and they're both trying to get the same guy, and one of the twin sisters in a final coup becomes the other twin sister and then gives the twin sister these horrific implants that make her more like a demon. Like she gives her like
Oh yeah.
like the antelope legs and like the chrome hands, and it's like hook hands, and it's like basically she's like a monster that you have to fight off. And you get these moments where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they've been driven insane because like they just look like that, and there are moments where they sort of get there. But I will say, like, for a game that's supposed to be about this, like your first Ship of Theseus reference shouldn't come at one of the endings, which a lot of people might not even see.
Yeah, I didn't
Yeah,
know they
it's only at
made a
the
reference to that.
very, very end, and it's still only in reference to the stuff they do with the engram, which, I mean, sure, you're coming at it at one end with, can an AI be human? Which I don't even feel like it does that properly, because at that point you're so willing to be like, oh, it's magic, that's how they look like people, and it's a little angel on your shoulder, that's Johnny. Like, I don't need more information than that. Like, honestly, like, having, like, that ghost on your shoulder that, like, can sort of possess you at times, like, it's like it's so close thematically, and it never does like more with it, except for like the shitty like, oh, relic malfunction, now you're gonna be like, oh shit, god damn it. And like, and that's all
There's
you.
also one shard called "The Truth About Cyberpsychosis" that sort of gets into it and talks about how like cyberpsychosis is portrayed as like, oh, it's a cyberware malfunction that drove people crazy and then they murder everyone. But I think it's kind of like supposed to be like a crank type of thing, you know, like a post from a crank, but they're basically saying like, oh, well, that's just the catalyst, and it's really like the society that we live in, like dehumanizing people and, you know, atomizing their relationships and stuff like that, which like is true and is basically responsible for like actual mental illness
Yeah.
in most cases. But I don't know that it's supposed to be something that you take seriously, and it's like just a, you know, piece of flavor text that you see on a table.
Yeah, it's not like really a central point to the game. Like, am I going crazy, or is it the society? Is it man versus society, or is it like,
Right.
yeah? and like that's the thing, like with a lot of aspects of it, like the most like when I think about the dystopian aspects, things like I've noticed, you might not notice it like for you, because like you're still early on, but for me, like one of the big things is like sometimes I will get interested in lore instead of like my own character build for a little bit. And like the weird thing is how unpolitical the game is in the electoral sense is like you don't really see your government that often. You see, gangs, you see police, you get to do something with the mayor for a little bit, and that's interesting. Especially with the implication towards the end, because you get to find out like they're
Yeah.
literally puppets. There's that sort of plot line going on in there. But like the weird thing is corporations at this point are still so much bigger and like so huge that corporations literally eclipse everything else, and we're not there yet. I don't know if we'd completely get there, but
But it still feels kind of like parochial because other than two foreign corporations, I don't feel like there's a whole lot of corporations from like all
yeah.
over the
I mean,
place.
basically, you have like, I mean, you do have like, I guess like a good like 5 or 6 that are mentioned because those are the ones that big enough to have like the armed guards. Like you have like the trauma team, uh, Miltech,
Yeah, Miltech.
Arasaka, of course, uh,
Uh-huh. There's a Chinese
Wang
one I can't remember the
Tao
name
or
of.
something, Kung Tao, Kung,
I
no,
keep
Kung
thinking Lao
Tao. I think
Chateau,
it's
which is tea
or King
nuggets.
Tao. I can't pronounce it because that's the one
Oh,
that
King
Hellman
Tao,
goes
yeah, that's
to.
it.
But it's like there's so there's so little that like your character actually like cares for politics. It's that sort of thing that already is like sunken in. It's like you can't change anything that's going on. I mean, even like gang stuff, even as you go through the game, like if I compare it to like Saints Row 2, in which you also end up fighting a corporation, the power of collective action, granted it's a street gang. At the very least, in like something like Saints Row 2, you're flipping turf, but like that never really happens in Cyberpunk. You do in huge sweeping missions against like some gangs. Like at some point, Tiger Claws shouldn't even exist, but they still do. Um, so
Yeah.
it feels kind of weird playing through it, like how just like static everything is. Although that now like that's less of like the dystopian aspect of Cyberpunk and more so just a gameplay element, I guess, that comes in.
I think we should put in our final thoughts. For me, I'm still blown away by the fact that this is based off of existing lore. After we've talked about all this stuff being kind of flat and like this doesn't seem like a game that is based on existing lore and took 8 years to make. It's not a bad game. I had fun playing it, but it is wild to me that there was this much time and existing IP put into it. I just don't understand what took 8 years, really. I did not pay for this game. I pirated it because I'm an ally and didn't want to give them my money. So I would recommend doing that if you're interested, but it doesn't sound that good after us talking about it. But it's not like a waste of time to play, I don't think. It's still a fun time. So yeah,
Okay.
that's about
Well,
all I
first of
have on
all,
it.
I just want to say that the I will die for the US cracks. Second, I will say like it's a fun game. We also didn't get anywhere near to like talking about like all of it, even though like the main story is short. Like say for like gameplay elements, we all came at it from a hacker perspective. The weird thing is it's so big you can do like a melee build pretty easily. You can be a samurai in the game. Although if you like doing samurai stuff in
Mm-hmm.
cyberpunk settings, there's a game called Ghost Runner that's pretty good. That I think does samurai gameplay a lot better. Um,
I was
it's
looking at getting
very
that the other
hard, but
day.
I would say it's more of a polished game than cyberpunk, but what isn't right now.
And if you really want to be a
Yeah,
samurai, just play
but
Neo
I
2.
would say like there's a lot of like controversy in the game because like some people want to be like it's just a game, but at the same time like I think you're sort of allowed to be a little bit mad even though it's still a good game, because it obviously you're allowed to say it's a disappointment. Like like literally because like they're getting government subsidies for it, and it's like you can't even deliver on what you got the subsidies for in the first place. Uh
Yeah, it's that
yeah.
whole let people enjoy things thing. Like, let people not enjoy
Yeah,
things. Let
let
people
people shit
complain.
talk
Shut the
and
fuck
also
up.
still have fun. You can do that. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's a cool time. You'll have fun. Sometimes you'll glitch people into the walls. Sometimes you'll get into a boxing match and you'll get glitched into the wall because they literally hit that hard. I don't know. If you're gonna get the game, you're gonna get the game. Either way, good game, but not great.
Yeah, I think I'd largely echo that, with the sort of caveat that I tend to judge these kind of games by like, what's the probability of you exiting the skybox, and judged on that metric, this is a fantastic game. If you just want to see like all the different ways that it can go wrong, like it does not disappoint. To that end, I would also even like recommend playing it on the base PS4. I didn't pay for the game either. I used store credit at a trade-in store, so I just got it for free. And I would say that's about the right price to pay for it, for the experience
Nice.
I've had. Although that's probably being a bit harsh. Like,
Yeah.
when the main story is in motion, and then when the game's usually not in motion, it's a very kind of like enjoyable atmosphere, and it's a very sort of popcorny approach to cyberpunk, kind of as a genre. With regards to like the thing that initially like interested me in it, the gender stuff, I just think they got way in over their head. It's very kind of conspicuous to include something like that, and then throughout the rest of the game say almost nothing about the existence of trans people and non-binary people in that world. I do know that there is a trans character later on in the game. She like drives a truck apparently, and her truck has like a trans pride flag on it. But other than that, like,
Yeah, that's
other
clear.
than that,
Yeah.
the Chromanticore advert, trans visibility and like visibility of trans and non-binary identities. Certainly for trans people, the visibility is just not there. Like, and they say nothing about the political status or the material status of trans people in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, judged purely on like my experience with the game, it seems like better than now. Like, no one seems to care or comment on these kind of things. Whereas at the moment, every day I log into Twitter, there's like some brand new, right wing goblin in the press whining about transgender people existing. Yeah, well, yeah, they're being silenced,
And
which
being
is why
silenced.
they're being invited onto like talk shows and writing. I mean, recently in the UK, a very prominent transphobe just got an OBE and like used her like sort of like Twitter thread talking about being given an OBE to complain about how silenced he is. It's like, you're literally a member of the British Empire now, or like an order of the British Empire. Like, you're a member of the establishment. You're not being silenced. Like, yeah, like back to Cyberpunk. Like, I think they got in over their head, including this kind of stuff in the game, and unfortunately, their kind of edgelord marketing around that, I think, worked. And I fully am expecting to see other companies try that in the future, at kind of having their cake and eating it, going towards a sort of inclusion or an inclusive character creator or what have you, or some theme in the game, but then actually saying next to nothing about it. So yeah, that's my big take on the game. Because other than that, I've spent most of my time in the game just kind of walking around watching it break.
Yeah, it is fun when it's
when
not
the frame
frustrating.
rate is stable. It's perfectly enjoyable. It's not great. If you want a game about hacking, and with the sort of like dystopian theming to it, I would just point people at Uplink, that hacking game.
Yeah, again, it's $250 on
snatch it
Steam
up.
right now, so can't go wrong. Well, John,
having
thank
me.
you for coming on and talking about this. I'm glad both of you volunteered to come on and talk about this stuff. Before we leave,
There's a
is
number
there
of
anything
different,
that either of you would like to
initiatives for,
plug?
like, so I've talked a lot about like trans issues. If you want to do some, hacktivism,
Mhm.
there's a number of different petitions that I've linked on my Twitter. And you'll see me post about on Twitter quite a lot. So rather than me remembering all the URLs for those kind of things, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at -PLNP, which is the formula for entropy. And we were going to talk about. But yeah, that's my plug. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll point people at things they can do to get involved in the media representation of trans people.
I don't really have anything to promote because I'm a selfish person. So Stan Blue Moon, Pom Pom Shit, streaming on all available platforms. And that's all I got.
Okay. Well, thanks to both of you, and thanks to everyone for listening. Bye-bye.